Hey guys, we use standard kiln-dried 2x6's to make this beautiful farmhouse table. In this video, we're going to show you exactly how we built this table and all the easy to follow techniques that you can do to build the same thing for your space. Look at the grain and the depth that you get. We use stone coat countertop epoxy as our finish coat to get this perfectly flat. We really had a good time. We're going to show you how we remove the tool marks, how we stain the boards, how we assemble and clamp our table surface together to get that rock solid finish. We're also going to show you how we plane everything flat. We're going to show you how to get everything smooth using standard sanding equipment. Visit us anytime at stonecoatcountertops.com. Enjoy the video. All right, folks, you want to make a farmhouse table. This is a budget-friendly, do-it-yourself project that we're using kiln-dried 2x6's from our local hardware store. We're going to show you exactly how we do it step by step and turn these 2x6's into an amazing table surface. The first thing that we're going to do is cut them to size. The reason we cut them to size now is so we don't have to over sand and stain boards that we're going to cut anyways. After we cut them, we're going to sand them starting at 60 grit and work our way up to 220 grit. Keeping in mind we need to remove the tool marks, the saw marks, and the stamps from these raw 2x6's. When we get that step finished, we're going to start the staining process. This is a fun project, easy to do. Stay tuned, we're going to give you all the tips and tricks right now. Let's get started and have a good time. The first step we're going to do is take our chop saw and cut all of these boards to length. After we do that, we're going to use a 50 grit metal sanding disc to remove any of the tool marks caused by the milling process. After this step, we're going to use our random orbital sander and sand these boards up to 220 grit to prepare them for staining. Okay guys, we got all of our 2x6's cut and sanded. We didn't quite know how big we were going to make it. I like this size. It's going to be an awesome little farmhouse table, and we're going to stain it with true black stain right now and see how this looks. Here we go. Before you get started on your wood project, make sure your moisture content is 13% or lower. We do have a moisture meter you can test that wood with first to make sure the epoxy is going to bond well. It's no problem using a stain, just make sure it dries before we apply the epoxy. Kiln dried, you should be okay, but it's still good to check, and you can kind of tell how heavy those boards are. If they're light, you're usually really safe. We're just using a blue shop rag to apply this true black Minwax stain. Just simply wipe it on and wipe off the excess. It's really simple. We're also going to take a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood and rip down 1.5 inch strips. This is going to allow us to pocket screw a perimeter to stack our table against, which makes the clamping process a lot easier. Okay guys, we're going to use our Tyvek tape. We're going to lay out a space here for our table to lay on so that when we pull it off after we form this up and glued it all up, it'll peel right off this 1/8 inch sheet of masonite. Using that Tyvek tape makes it easy after your table has cured to pull it up off of this work surface. Also, we're going to use those 1.5 inch strips that we've ripped down, and we're going to pocket screw those using a Kreg pocket jig. That makes life really simple. When you build your perimeter and you stack your table, you have something to push against and keep everything nice and true. You're also going to use that Tyvek tape on those strips so that they don't glue to your table. Preload them with 1 1/4 coarse thread Kreg screws. This makes it really simple to screw everything down. We're pulling against our backstop and creating a nice edge. We're going to stack our table up and get everything mocked up just how we'd like it. Okay guys, we got all of these stuck in our form here. We've got our backstop that's really tight that I could push against, and that's not going to move. So I'm just going to take this piece now and sandwich everything together so it's going to hold it nice and tight when we glue this up. We've let all the 2x6's dry for 24 hours after we've stained them, and we're now building our form and building that perimeter so that we can mix up our stone coat countertop epoxy and glue all of these boards together. It holds very, very well. It's been over 24 hours. We've let the stain completely dry. We've blown off any dust, and we're ready for the next step. We've mixed up our normal stone coat countertop epoxy. We're going to use this as our glue to glue all these boards together, and then we're going to put downward pressure with some of our 2x4s and clamps and let this set up overnight. Let's get started. We're just going to use our standard stone coat countertop epoxy and our chop brush to add a little bit of epoxy to each edge, brush it on, and squeeze these boards together. One of the great benefits of using stone coat countertop epoxy to glue your table up is the fact that it dries crystal clear. If we get glue all over the surface, that's no problem. It's going to dry clear and it's going to match our finish that we eventually finish this table with. Another great benefit is the long working time. I don't have to be in a big rush gluing this all up and clamping it right away. I could take my time and get everything just as I need it, so I'm not in a rush and stressed out trying to put my table back together. What we're going to do now is squeeze everything tight, put our board tight back to this table, and then we'll start our downward pressure with our other 2x4s here. Let's get started. We're going to finish off our table form on the perimeter by squeezing everything nice and tight so it locks together. We're going to use our extra epoxy in all the cracks and crevices and brush that in. Also, use a torch and torch out any of the air that's in that epoxy so it dries crystal clear. When you're going to use these 2x4s, make sure the edge that's actually touching your farmhouse table has that Tyvek tape so it's a nice clean release. After we've gotten all of the downward pressure boards clamped to our table, we're going to get our bar clamps. We're going to squeeze this table nice and tight so you get all of those boards just bonding so strong. That's key here. Just get everything very tight using your clamps. We have plenty of time to go through and glue all our boards up, situate them as we want, put our downward pressure with our 2x4s, and then our pressure coming this direction with our bar clamps. That's really important to have enough working time and not to make a mess on your actual surface that you're going to have to sand all that wood glue and stuff like that off. Plus, there's absolutely amazing strength in the bond that you're going to get using our stone coat countertop epoxy to glue this table up. It's tenacious. All right, we're going to let this dry. We'll come back in 24 hours and we'll start our next step. We'll see you then. Okay guys, our farmhouse table is all glued up. What we're going to do now is unclamp everything and take it out of the form and start our next step. Okay, it's time to remove all of our clamps as well as our bar clamps. We're going to get everything put away, and then we're going to get our square drive out and release all these Kreg pocket screws. Now it's important not to get epoxy in your pocket screws or else they're going to be really hard to get out. Now look at how easy this table is going to come off this surface because it had that Tyvek tape. That stuff is amazing. Now that we've flipped our table over, we're looking at the top side of our table surface. We're using our slab jig that can be found at stonecoatcountertops.com. This slab jig is perfect for flattening this farmhouse table or large slabs or any woodworking project that you're going to prepare for epoxy. We really love how flat it gets and how that surface planing router bit gets it very smooth. Okay, the next step in our project, we're going to flip our table over. We're going to cut 3/4 by 3/4 inch square metal tubing. We're going to just leave it shy of each edge of our table. We'll grind it with a 50 grit metal sanding disc and clean those bars with acetone. We're going to use a 2x4 as our straight edge, and we're going to simply use a 3/4 inch router bit and router out a channel so we can embed these bars underneath our table. This stops our table from cupping or warping over time. It acts like rebar. Now we're going to use our product called Quick Coat. Quick Coat is going to be a fast drying epoxy to embed these bars so that it holds our timeline right on schedule. This will be dry in 3 hours and ready for us to sand. As you can see at each end of our table, we change the direction of our boards, so we're going to use little square tubes to create a long-term joint there as well. Okay, now we're going to use our Quick Coat and some of our epoxy thickener, and we're going to create a nice paste. We're going to use our black metallic to tint that paste, and we're going to use a paint stick to put that wherever those cracks and crevices are, and then simply use a Bondo spreader to put a thin coat over the entire table surface. This is going to prep us so that we can do our seal coats and not lose our epoxy down those cracks and crevices. After about 3 hours of dry time, we're going to use our 50 grit metal sanding disc to remove that excess tinted Quick Coat. We're only going to leave that Quick Coat in all those cracks and crevices, and this will give us a great finished product. Now it's time to start our finish sanding using a random orbital sander. We're going to start with 60 grit and work our way up to 220 grit, removing all of those sanding marks, preparing our table for staining. We're also going to router the edges with a 1/4 inch roundover bit. This creates a nice edge for a beautiful table. Now we're going to stain the top side of our table. We're going to use that true black Minwax stain and a blue shop rag. We're going to wipe it on and then simply wipe off the excess. Now it's time to apply your first epoxy seal coat. This is a 1-to-1 ratio and you're going to do about 1 ounce per square foot. We're just using a shower squeegee. We're going to squeegee on the entire surface and then use our gloved hand to rub it in the edges. After rubbing those edges with our gloved hand, we're going to use a torch and pop any excess bubbles. After that, we're going to let it dry and come back the next day for our second seal coat. To prepare for that coat, we're going to sand with 220 grit, and we're going to follow that same procedure by squeegeeing on 1 ounce per square foot and rubbing those edges with our gloved hand. We're going to do 3 seal coats in total, and each one looks better and better. Now after your third seal coat has dried, you're going to look for any leftover pinholes. We're going to address these using a burn-in stick. These burn-in sticks can be found on our product page. What we're going to do is sand with 220. We're going to take that Mohawk burn-in stick, we'll heat it up with our torch, and we'll simply rub it in our little pin dot. And what this does is fill those before our final flood coat. Sometimes you get these little stubborn pin dots, and this is the trick of the trade. This is how you address those without doing a whole nother seal coat. We'll torch that, we'll wipe off the excess, and then sand it nice and flush to get ready for our final flood coat. Okay guys, we got all this filled wherever there was still little divots. We got those filled in, and now we're ready to sand with 220 right before our flood coat. So we'll sand it, we'll wipe the dust, and then we'll do our flood coat at 3 ounces per square foot, and watch this thing lay out like a sheet of glass. This farmhouse table is going to be amazing. Let's do it right now. We're going to sand and scratch up our table surface using a 220 grit sanding disc. Don't worry, our flood coat will hide all your sanding marks like magic. You're also going to sand the edges of your table to remove any nibs and nubs and high points. Also, where we routered, be sure not to burn through your color and sand those as well. Wipe the dust with a shop rag and mix 3 ounces per square foot of our normal stone coat countertop epoxy. We're going to mix that for full speed for 2 minutes, and then one final wipe with that blue shop towel. You'll be ready to pour the epoxy right down the center of your table. We're going to use our chop brush and prime that brush so that it doesn't pull up our epoxy where we start chopping. We're going to use our 1/8 by 1/8 square notch trowel to spread the epoxy, and then we'll chop out any of those trowel marks using our chop brush. We're going to chop our table surface, then we'll use that brush to brush the perimeter to get a very nice even finish with long horizontal strokes. We'll torch our table 3 times. Look at how it lays out. After that, we're going to let our table set up for about 5 days. We'll flip it over, we'll remove the drips, and we'll install our finished table legs. Wow, this came out nice. Oh my goodness, I really cannot believe how beautiful the flood coat makes this farmhouse table finish off. Remember, those seal coats are never going to lay out perfect. Don't try to make them perfect. They're simply there to stop the wood, because it's porous, from leaking air. You'll do 3 seal coats at 1 ounce per square foot and 1 final flood coat at 3 ounces per square foot, and you'll get it to lay out like a sheet of glass. That burn-in stick is just the trick of the day. Use that burn-in stick to get any of those little pinholes that are still there after your 3rd seal coat, and boom, it's going to lay out like you wouldn't believe. What other stain would you like to see on a farmhouse table? What else do you think would look good? That's the question of the day. Also, feel free to call us for free project support. Woodworkers and DIYers, they love calling in for free project support anytime. We're happy to walk you through your project and help you along the way. Hey, visit our website at stonecoatcountertops.com. Remember, give us a thumbs up. Give us a comment. Give us your feedback. We appreciate all of that. Help us get higher in the queue. And remember, until the next project, from Stone Coat Countertops, you got this. We'll see you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. Remember, subscribe down there below and hit that bell for notifications so you get informed when we have new content coming right at you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, $77.82 for the Tyvek tape, the 10 boards, and the white sheet. Not bad.
Not bad?
Not bad. We're
All right, would you like to open a Home Depot card and save $25 with a bid?
good. No.
All right, throw that in.